Welcome to Bogur School, and today we're gonna learn how to play RAMATTRA. First, we're gonna start with his abilities, and well, there's quite a lot of them. RAMATTRA has 5 abilities and 2 different primary fires. His shift, which changes his form, his E, that pulls people down, his right click that changes abilities based on his form, in the default form he places a shield, and the Nemesis form he blocks. Finally, we have his ult. First and foremost, I'm gonna start off with his default form. In his normal form, he has 450 HP and no armor, but his hitbox is quite small for a tank. His primary fire is a long-range projectile weapon that has some travel time to it. It can crit and deal a lot of damage. It does not have any fall off, but beware that it's really hard to aim it at long distances. His E is a projectile with a 12-second cooldown that deals a small amount of damage over time, slows people, and pulls people down as long as enemies are inside the circle. If they're in the sky, they get instantly pulled to the ground, and abilities like Winston Leap don't really work in it as well. This affects abilities that give you vertical height, like for example Baptiste Jump, Doomfist Slam, and Diva boosters. The projectile itself is affected by gravity and it takes time before it reaches the ground. This ability also bounces off shields, walls, and enemies. So it's gonna take some time before you get used to it and actually can aim it at targets. It's also really good when you're trying to chase people down or if somebody is pushing into your team and overextending. Now, many of you might have been left with the impression that this ability is good against flying heroes, and that is really not the case, because its vertical range isn't that high up and it's pretty easy to avoid it. Overall, I would say that this ability is basically a worse soldier in E. His right click places a shield for a small duration that has 1000 HP. You point at where you want to place it and that's it. Overall, you want to use this ability to deny heals, ults, or allow your team to poke. It also stays after you change to Nemesis Form, so you can use it to protect yourself as you pummel the enemies. This ability is decent, but it's far from the best shield in the game. Not to mention that the cooldown is really long at around 15 seconds. But it's really strong when you want to take space or create opportunities for your team. Now to get to the most important part of his kit, the bread and butter of this hero, his shift. He transforms into Nemesis Form, which gives him 150 armor that goes on top of his HP. His primary and secondary also get changed when he is in Nemesis Form. And his primary fire changes to a punch that has no ammo, pierces shields, deflect, bubbles, everything you can think of, and enemies as well. So if people are stacked up together, you can punch them and beat the crap out of them all at the same time. Now yes, it does pierce, bubble, and Genji deflect, but it doesn't deal damage to these targets, and it actually gives Zarya charge if you punch the bubble. The punch deals around 60 damage and extends a short distance forward. Now, his right click is changed from his normal form, and instead of a shield, he actually has a block that negates a large amount of damage that comes from the front. The ability blocks exactly 50% of the damage, and it also slows you whenever you're using it. It has no cooldown, so you can spam it as much as you want. Beware that it only blocks damage from the front, but you can just hug a corner and stay alive for a long time, and this way you can stall the car. His E stays the same, and overall Nemesis Form allows you to punish people who are too close and create space for your team by pushing into the enemies. You can use it after you take some damage to bait the enemies to push into you, then you can use E to slow them down and pummel them with your punches. You can also cancel it early so that the cooldown starts sooner, but beware that you're very vulnerable without this form and people will push you. If you're gonna use it, you should get kills or get into a safe position before it's over. Finally, his ult transforms you into Nemesis Form again and gives you a large area effect that latches onto enemies and deals damage over time. As long as you're latched onto something, your ult will keep going. Otherwise, it will just last for 3 seconds if there are no enemies nearby. This means that this ult can basically run forever in overtime, because the enemy has to touch, and every time somebody touches, it extends the duration of your ult. There's a lot of possibilities with this ult, and in the right situation, it's really good, but it's really easy to waste it. Now that we've talked about all of his abilities, I have some general tips for RAMATTRA. First, something that I figured out that is quite obvious is that you can use Nemesis Form, and then after your Nemesis Form ends, you can use your ult to extend it. For example, I'm gonna use my shift, I'm gonna punch people a bunch. When it ends, I'm gonna lose the 200 armor. And then I can use my ult again, which will give me 200 more armor. After my ult ends, I can use Nemesis Form again. So that's another 8 seconds. This allows me to survive a lot longer, and second of all, allows me to apply way more pressure. Now, the second tip is that RAMATTRA isn't Reinhardt. You shouldn't be always going in and pushing the enemies whenever you can. Instead, you should be playing more carefully, baiting out the enemy cooldowns and then punishing them with your slow or your shift. It's very hard to push RAMATTRA, but it's very easy to kill him if he doesn't have his Nemesis Form. Not to mention that his hitbox becomes very large when he is in Nemesis Form. I also think a lot of people are gonna make the mistake of being too afraid to cancel their Nemesis Form when the fight is over. It's absolutely fine to switch forms just to kill the people on card or the people near you, and then swap forms to kill people from afar. Do not be afraid. Another reason you should do it is because you're gonna get your Nemesis Form off cooldown a lot earlier. Now, the third tip that I think is pretty important is the fact that you should use your block a lot more. It's very good at stalling card, also very good at helping you survive. So if you're ever low HP or half HP and you think you're gonna die, it's absolutely okay to use Nemesis Form and hold right click to survive. It's very hard to deal with him, and you're gonna create a lot of space for your team by taking a lot of damage. Now that we have the basics out of the way, the real question is, where does RAMATTRA fit in Overwatch 2? Well, it's pretty simple. I feel like RAMATTRA is a rush character that allows a lot more versatility because of his two forms. So before the fight begins, he can poke a lot and farm his ult while creating opportunities for his team with his shield and his slow, and when they actually get closer, you can punch them a lot and win the fight. In general, whatever characters work well with Reinhardt will also work really well with RAMATTRA. For example, Lucio RAMATTRA is really strong because the speed boost allows him to catch his enemies with his ult and his Nemesis Form. Therefore, in a perfect scenario, I think you should always run Lucio with RAMATTRA. As for second support, Kiriko will probably be the best pick. Why? Well, Kiriko is OP in the first place, and second of all, when you combo RAMATTRA with her ultimate, he literally becomes a JoJo character. As for maps, it goes without saying that he excels the most in more enclosed places or maps that don't really have that much high ground. Like for example, King's Row. I think that's a really good map for RAMATTRA. Now let's talk about his weaknesses. Characters like Roadhog will absolutely dominate you on RAMATTRA. I'm sorry to say, you can't really do much against them. Not to mention that the high damage output from a Roadhog will probably insta-kill you if you ever get caught while not in Nemesis Form. Also, if they're playing characters like Zen, Echo, Junkrat, anything that deals a bunch of damage, you will die in 0.0001 seconds. It's just not a fun time. Finally, he is horrible in open maps, for example Havana or Junkertown, or maps that have a lot of high ground, like for example Gibraltar, because he has zero mobility and he can never contest the high ground. His damage output is just not high enough to actually do anything from long range, not to mention that it's really hard to aim his mouse 1. Now, to be honest, a lot of people are gonna disagree with me, but I don't believe he's actually OP. The reason why I don't think he's actually broken is, well, because at the end of the day, he doesn't have any mobility whatsoever. Poke comms or spam comms or high damage compositions or whatever you want to call them just absolutely destroy him. By the time he reaches the enemy Zenyatta, he's gonna be long dead by the Junkrat or the Echo or any of the other countless DPS or snipers that are sitting across the map. To be honest, I'll probably eat my words in a few weeks when he becomes meta after he gets unlocked in ranked. Until then, you should check out my second channel, bogur 2, where I'm going to post full RAMATTRA gameplay on the new map. Unedited, raw footage. And with that, I'll finish this guide. Check out my stream at twitch.tv/bogur, and thank you for watching. Class dismissed.
Projížděl jsem dědinou, cestou na Vizovice, přivítal mě předseda.